Was buying pills online. Back then, it was very easy to do. And because I had a physical problem, it was really easy to share reports. So the x-rays and the MRIs and look, I'm in pain. And I'm this middle class mom driving a minivan, Girl Scout leader. So of course the doctors are going to believe me. I'm not a quote addict. And like, remember, this was back in the early 2000s. And so a lot wasn't known about addiction back then. So it got to the point where I was doctor shopping. I was buying online. I got in severe debt because I was paying with my credit cards. And of course you could order them online, but it came at a cost.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Recovery Couch, where we share honest stories and real hope. Today, I'm joined by Karen. Her recovery journey began after a car accident that led to prescribed pain pills. What started as medical use slowly became a problem. And Karen made the decision to enter treatment and begin recovery. Karen has described her relationship with the pain pills as so deep that quitting felt like grieving the loss of her father. After working a recovery program for over 6 years, Karen later found herself acting out in other ways, eventually turning to alcohol. A defining moment came in Karen's life when her daughter gave her an ultimatum: either quit drinking or don't show up to my graduation. That moment led Karen back into recovery, this time fully committed. We're excited to dive deep into Karen's story right after a word from our sponsor. This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. If you're looking to buy or sell a home, Greg brings heart, hustle, and honesty to every deal. Call Greg at 937-477-8975 today and tell him the Recovery. All right, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Recovery Couch. I'm so excited that you decided to join us today, where we deliver unapologetic, raw, faith-based messages that are covered in the blood of Jesus. I encourage all of my guests to speak from their heart. And I encourage my guests to speak with no filter. Psalm 139 verse 4 tells us that God knows our words before we speak them. Romans 5:8 tells us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, which is why the Recovery Couch exists. To meet other people where they are, because at the Recovery Couch, we believe that when you offer people a space to show up and be real, then you offer people a place to show up and heal. Today, I'm with a very special guest, a lady who has an unbelievable testimony. Her testimony's taken her through difficult times with addiction and an opportunity to put her best foot forward in recovery. I'd like to welcome to the show Karen Pizza. Karen, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, Karen. Yeah, so I don't want to steal your shine. Why don't you tell us and the listeners what started the addiction?
Well, it started about 22 years ago. A little bit longer than that, probably, but I was in a really bad car accident when I was 24. Had neck injuries. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. When they did figure out, I was too young for surgery, so they did what all good doctors back then did and prescribed me opioids for the pain. And the first couple of years, honestly, it wasn't an issue. I would take them as I needed, although I should have had an inkling when the very first time I took one, I felt like I drank a six-pack of beer without the hangover. And so it was a nice feeling. I had energy. I'm not one of these people who gets knocked out or a zombie like, or has hallucinations when I take pain pills. They make me feel good, or they used to make me feel good. So fast forward a few years, every time I would take one, if I thought I was taking too many, I would put them away. And at this point, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have 2 kids. Loving husband, loving family, everything on the outside looked great, almost down to the white picket fence. And I remember exactly the time that I took a pill for a reason other than the pain. And I had actually, it's kind of funny, my mom was coming over and I needed to clean the house before she got here. And I took a pain pill simply for that reason. And that's where my addiction took off. And it went on and on and on till it got to the point where I was doctor shopping. I was buying pills online. Back then, it was very easy to do. And because I had a physical problem, it was really easy to share reports. So the x-rays and the MRIs and look, I'm in pain. And I'm this middle class mom driving a minivan, Girl Scout leader. So of course the doctors are going to believe me. I'm not a quote addict. And like, remember, this was back in the early 2000s. And so a lot wasn't known about addiction back then. So it got to the point where I was doctor shopping. I was buying online. I got in severe debt because I was paying with my credit cards. And of course you could order them online, but it came at a cost. And my life spiraled out of control where people knew something was going on and I would lie and say I was tired or whatever. And I was just, like I said, everything looked perfect on the outside and I was completely miserable on the inside. I had no soul. My son was, I think, 7 at the time or 8, and my daughter was 3 or 4. And I would go hide in my room and I would take pills and I hide in my room. And if my daughter needed something, I would leave it up to my son to do it. And, my son is 31 now and I still have guilt over that. I've made reconciliation with it, but it's still something that as a mom, it hurts me to my core that my addiction took me to that point where I just didn't care about anyone but myself. So it got to the point where I was literally chasing down the UPS man for my drugs because he was running late and I was running out, which meant I was going to be sick. And the credit card bills were large, and it got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. I was constantly stressed, constantly anxious, worrying about getting caught. And at this point, I was taking so many pills at the time that, it was obvious that something was going on. So I decided that, and I was just thinking about this the other day, February 23rd, 2003 was the date I went to a facility. Not saying that's what's needed from anybody, but that's where I went. And when I walked in the doors, I was not sure if I was going to be allowed to come home or not, or I was going to be staying there for 30 days. But I knew at this point I didn't have a choice in the matter. And it killed me to think that I was going to be leaving my kids for 30 days. And by the grace of God, I was able to do outpatient. And they helped me wean off the pills over a week. They suggested I go to a 12-step meeting that night and call my doctors, let them know that I have a problem. And it's been 20-some years, and I can tell you now, I still remember making that phone call to the doctor, telling them to mark my file that I was an addict. When I hung up the phone, the amount of grief I had was just as bad as when my father died. It was, the love affair was that strong. So I started working a program, making connections, started sharing where I was at. And I can tell you that when I walked into the meeting, and there's all different ways for recovery, but when I got around other addicts, it was the first time in my life, and I was 38 at this point, I think, that I felt welcome. I felt seen. I felt like I belonged. I was always very good at being the chameleon and fitting in wherever I needed to. I was a jock in high school. I had lots of friends. I could be whatever I needed to be to fit in, but I never quite felt like I fit in anywhere. And I walked into this room full of other addicts, and I literally felt like I was home. And it was crazy because back then, like I said, they didn't know a lot about pain pill addiction and how bad it really is. And I'm in the room, and I'll never forget this because one of the people in the room is still a really good friend of mine. It's a guy who has like tattoos all over his neck, his face, the whole 9 yards. And I always teased him that if I saw him out on the street somewhere, I probably would have crossed the street and went to the other side. He is a true testament that looks are deceiving. He is one of the sweetest, nicest, most intelligent people you'll ever meet in your life. And my eyes got open. And I learned that I wasn't alone, that there's a lot of people out there like me. And as a mom and being responsible for kids and the house and all that stuff, there was such an expectation of what I should be, and everyone else came first, that even though I wasn't happy, the only way I knew to get happy was to take the drug. And maybe the first couple times that worked, but after that it didn't. I was in the program for, I want to say about 7, 8 years, something like that. And, attending the meetings, I had sponsees, doing the whole 9 yards. And then I decided that I was good and didn't need to go back anymore and stopped going to meetings. And life was going fine, except for looking back now, it wasn't, because I started spending money and I started acting out in other ways. I've always had a strong faith and a strong belief in God. But, when the drugs came in, he went out. And I just wasn't leaning on anyone or anything. And fast forward a couple years, and I decided to have a glass of wine because alcohol wasn't a drug. And, I could drink. I drank in high school, but everybody drank in high school. Alcohol wasn't a problem for me, or that's what I thought. Looking back, I can remember many a times where I got blackout drunk, but it wasn't a all the time kind of thing. So I wasn't an alcoholic. So that went on for a couple of years. It went from a glass of wine here or there to a big bottle of wine every night. And with my daughter being a senior in high school at this point, I was physically there, mentally I wasn't. And what woke me up, and again, I was miserable. I was just so unhappy and so depressed. And I had postpartum depression after my son was born. Again, something they didn't know a lot about back then. And had been medicated for that. So I think mental health is a big part of addiction. It's my own personal opinion. I see it a lot. And so anyway, my daughter came to me and told me if I didn't do something, if I didn't start going back to meetings, if I didn't get help, I was not going to be invited to her graduation. And again, broke my heart in two, and I realized I needed help. So I went back to the same program I had been in before, as far as a 12-step program, and I started all over again and started from the beginning. And during this time, I was very strong in my recovery. I had become a Reiki master at this point, which is a career I never thought I'd have. And so there's a lot of spirituality with that. And things were good. And even during that time, my father-in-law, who was like a dad to me, I took care of him for 7 months in hospice. And so he passed. And then 4 months later, my mom got sick and died 2 weeks later. So I had the only two parental figures I had left in my life, both passed within 4 months of each other. And I stayed clean through all of it because I had a network, I had a program, I had people that understood and that would listen and let me cry or whatever I needed to do. And I was vulnerable enough to let that happen. And then a couple of years after that, I was dealing with some family drama, some old traumas that came up that I had not even thought about. And, decided that, I just don't want to feel this way. So I'm going to take a drink. I'm going to drink. And that started my recovery journey all over again because it got bad quick. And it was, again, this time it started with wine, but it went to vodka real quick because, you can't smell vodka on someone. Well, let me tell you, that's a lie. People can smell the vodka on you. And it progressed to the point that I was, buying a little bottle of vodka every day and drinking it during the day when no one was home. And
this episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by JB Davis at South Dayton Toyota. For integrity, service, and unbeatable deals, call JB and his team at 513-267-5225 and tell them the Recovery Couch sent you.
The whole cycle was starting all over again. Back to me being miserable and unhappy and not knowing how to get out of it, and that whole spiral. For me, when the addiction starts up, when it gets active, everything else spirals out of my life, and I'm just in this black hole that I cannot get out of. And it gets to the point that even alcohol doesn't get me out of it. And so I knew what I needed to do, and I started back into meetings. And I wish I could say 4 years ago when I relapsed and started back, I wish I could say that I've stayed sober the entire time, but I haven't. And it was, I've done, again, I'm not suggesting anyone work a 12-step program or any of that, but I've worked all 12 steps in NA twice. Both times after I finished them, I relapsed. So it was telling me there's something I was missing.
What do you think that was?
I finally figured it out. I couldn't acknowledge that I was an alcoholic. Straight up. I could say I was an addict because, I haven't done pills for 22 years. Plus, I was a white collar addict. I only did pills. I didn't do all that other stuff. Which is bullshit. Excuse my French, but it's bullshit. It doesn't matter what you abuse. If you're abusing something, there's an issue. And so I started drinking, and I would stop, and then I would start, and then I would stop, and then I would start. Never stopped going to meetings, still showing up every week and several times a week. And I just couldn't put the vodka down. It's like my feeling, whenever I would get really anxious or my feelings would come up, and I'm a recovering people pleaser. I've always felt like my job was to make everyone else happy and to make sure they're good. And being an empath on top of it, I'm picking up other people's feelings. So if my husband comes home stressed, I'm going to be stressed. If my son's having an issue or my daughter's having an issue, I'm going to have an issue. And I'm going to feel like I have to fix it. And if I can't fix it, then my world spirals. And the alcohol kind of numbed that noise, so I didn't hear it so much, so I didn't care as much. And it was interesting because when I first started realizing things, one of the things I realized with alcohol was it was the only time I could have a voice. Like, I didn't have enough courage to speak up or to say what I needed or what bothered me or whatever. It wasn't until I drank that I could actually allow myself to say those things. Unfortunately, when I did say those things, they didn't necessarily come out right. And they came out and they scared my kids when it was the, oh, you'll be better off without me kind of thing. My kids thought I was going to kill myself. I wasn't planning on it. It was me playing the victim. And again, I can't change what happened in the past. All I can do is work towards the future. And it wasn't until almost a year ago that, I don't know, something clicked in my head and I realized that I was an alcoholic. Now, anyone else looking at me would know I was an alcoholic, and alcohol is a drug. So they kind of all go hand in hand. There's alcohol, there's sex, there's shopping, there's all kinds of things. There's gambling. But growing up in my house, my dad was a functioning alcoholic. He got up every day. He went to work. He provided for the family. He only drank beer. So I didn't even know he was an alcoholic until I got married and moved out and realized that, somebody doesn't drink a case of beer or two in a weekend by themselves. That's just not normal. And my mother never wanted to talk about it. The word alcoholic was bad. I think a lot of her family were alcoholics. And so alcoholic had a really bad connotation to it. And in my subconscious, it was like, I couldn't admit that. And it's kind of crazy. And my sponsor today laughs at me because he'll say to me, Karen, you do realize that saying you're an alcoholic is much more socially acceptable than saying you're a drug addict. It's like, yeah, but not in my house. It was, it was crazy. But once I realized that, something clicked, and I started really working on myself. I started digging in. I started to do some therapy work. I did EMDR. I've done a lot of deep digging to look at past traumas that I've held on to from my childhood and so forth that made me want to get outside myself. And biggest thing I did, and I still do, is share. I share where I am. I share where I'm feeling. More so with other addicts, alcoholics, whatever you want to call them, than my family. My family are normal people and earthlings, and so they don't always understand the feelings and the intensity of the feelings. They're very supportive and understanding, but they just don't quite get it like another addict would. And I've learned not to keep my mouth shut, and I used to all the time, and that's why I relapsed every time, because I wouldn't share where I was or where I was feeling. And what I have found is sharing where I am, there's always someone else who's been there before or has some experience with whatever it is I'm going through that can help me move through it, move through that minute, move through that day without having to pick up a substance. And it's been a journey. This past year, actually on March 12th, I will have 1 year completely sober.
Let's go.
Yeah, and it's been look, I just it's been a journey that this past summer I lost one of my very first sponsees that I had years ago, who was like a daughter to me. He passed away from this disease. And I was there for that. 2 weeks later, my dog of 10 years passed away suddenly. 3 weeks after that, my nephew passed away from a semi-direct result of this disease with kratom, which, by the way, is very easy to get everywhere. And I'm sorry, but I have to get on my soapbox for a second. And it's highly addictive, and it's not just making you feel like you have meth. Go down to the rabbit hole and look. A couple make you feel like you have meth. A lot of them make you feel like you're on opioid. And he had an issue with that. And ultimately, it caused him to have a stroke and at 45, and he died. So lots and lots and lots of grief in a very short period of time. But I was fortunate because I stayed in the middle of my program. I let myself, for one of the first times, I let myself acknowledge however I was feeling that day. And that minute, because it goes back and forth. Some minutes, some days I'm happy, hopeful. Other days I might feel depressed or whatever. It's very interesting to me that every time I start working a program and really get into the middle of it, God, the universe, whatever. I don't like to use the word God because some people are turned off by that word. That one of the words we use, like good, orderly direction. My higher power it always shows up. There's always these synchronicities that things happen when they're supposed to, when I actually am awake to look for them and see them. It's been an amazing journey. My relationship with my higher power is stronger than it's ever been. I was raised Catholic. When I was growing up, God, in my family, God was more of a punishing God. I hit my foot on the table and my mom would say, "Oh, that's for talking back. God's punishing you for talking back." So I came around believing he was punishing and didn't want what was best for us. My view on that has completely changed to 180. My higher power is loving and caring and only wants what's best for me. And all I have to do is let him in. Him, it, her, whatever the higher power is for you, is to let him in. And it's made a huge difference. And reaching out when I'm feeling a certain way and I want to grab a drink, reaching out to someone and saying, I want a drink today. I don't know why, I just want to drink. Because for me, it's not always when things are going bad. Typically, it's when things are going good. And I either get bored or I don't even know I'm an addict. For whatever reason, it can happen. And I just decide and then my It's like I start craving it out of nowhere, even though I know from past experience that I'm going to feel like crap. The first drink, it just doesn't sit like it used to go anymore. And I just, I can't do substances. So today I'm much more aware just for today, and I'm paying attention and thanking my higher power. And I ask him every morning to come in and help me, keep me grounded and clear-headed, and to give me the strength to walk through the day. And I refuse to let this addiction win anymore. I'm a stubborn Irish woman, and I'm putting that stubbornness to work at this point and say, you know what, screw you. You're not going to get the best of me. And that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, so awesome. Karen, thank you so much for your courage to share your life, that you're making a choice to help other people. Understand that recovery is possible, that there are success stories in recovery, regardless of relapse, regardless of the type of substance. It's okay to, and I love that our society's embracing what I'm about to say, but it's okay to admit that there was a point in time where or you're not okay. And I love that you're doing that. And I love that society's embracing that concept. Because for far too long, and my family had history of substance use and alcohol use, and that was normal for a long time, and very rarely were people allowed to openly discuss. Yeah, I have an issue with substance. That was a sign of weakness, and now people are seeing it as a sign of strength. And I want you to know that I see your story as strong. Real quick before we hop off here, Karen, if you were to sponsor or to mentor somebody in their early recovery, how would you encourage them without making them feel like recovery is going to be something so difficult? Because a lot of addicts or alcoholics see, okay, I can never use again, I can never drink again, as a very tall task. How do you encourage somebody in their early recovery?
Well, I remember when I first got off of the pain pills, I had to stay clear of all substances. And I thought, how am I never going to drink again? This is ridiculous. I'm never going to be able to do that. So I said, okay, I'll give myself a year. I won't drink for a year. And if after a year I want to drink, then we'll do that. And I did do that for several years. But for today, what I tell people is, you know what? You take it 5 minutes at a time. If you have a day, no matter what, if you have a day where you didn't put any substances in your system, it's a good day. Well, sometimes those 24 hours are really, really long, especially when you first start. So you do it 5 minutes at a time. You take 5 minutes and say, I'm not going to use the next 5 minutes. You drive past the liquor store, you don't stop. There's this saying that always irritates the crap out of me, where if you don't pick it up, you can't put it in you. Well, yeah. But sometimes those voices in my head are so strong, it's hard to not pick it up. So distract yourself. I highly recommend you reach out to, there's so many different forms of recovery nowadays, between spiritual, there's the NA, AA, there's Celebrate Recovery, there's Christian-based programs. There's all kinds of programs out there now because people are finally aware that there is a major problem with addiction in this world. And you're not alone. That's the biggest thing. I can guarantee you there is someone in this world, no matter what it may look like, who's been through what you've been through. And that's my real big platform, because like I said, I was a stay-at-home mom with 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. No one would have had a clue that I was an addict. And God forbid I show it, because then I'm not fitting into whatever society thinks I should be. And I just, one day, 1 minute, whatever it took, to just keep moving forward and share where you are. Call somebody, pick up the phone, and just all you have to say is, I want to drink, I want to use, whatever it is. And the person on the other end not only will understand, you're helping them, because it's reminding, like for me, I speak for me personally, when someone does that, it reminds me of where I was. It reminds me of that pain. And it reminds me that I don't want to go back to that pain again. So it keeps the recovery fresh in my mind by helping others.
Yeah, fantastic encouragement. Oftentimes in recovery, I find myself needing to reground and just slow down and be present with myself. And that was all part of the process for me. And it continues to be the part of the process for me where I have to be okay with being alone with myself. And sometimes thoughts of using and things do come into my head. But today, with the proper tools, meditation, breath work, prayer, calling somebody in my sober support network, I'm able to overcome those temptations and those triggers. And I can just be at peace with myself. So very, very, very good, encouraging words, Karen. I want to thank you so much for showing up here today and sharing your story. It's a very encouraging, very triumphant story, and I'm so rooting for you for the rest of your recovery. Keep pouring into people and everybody out there listening. I hope that you all know that you have a seat right here on the recovery couch. Second Chance Studios is a professional sound-isolated recording studio in Canton, Ohio. The studio serves podcasters, recording artists, and video creators. Second Chance Studios is equipped with top-tier equipment like Shure microphones and the Rodecaster Pro 2. Second Chance Studios uses Logic Pro and Adobe Premiere Pro for their editing software. The studio offers expert podcast, video, and audio engineering services. To book a session, call 740-491-0354, and that's Second Chance Studios, where quality meets purpose. Gosh, Karen, thank you so much for sharing your story with such honesty and courage. Your journey is so powerful, and it's a powerful reminder that recovery isn't always linear, but it is always possible. We just have to be willing to be honest and start again. If you're listening and parts of Karen's story hit close to home, whether it's prescription drugs, alcohol, grief, or relapse, know that you're not alone, and it's never too late to recommit your life to recovery. I'd like to thank you for joining us on the Recovery Couch. If this episode encouraged you, please share it with someone who may need it. And remember, you always have a seat right here on the Recovery Couch.